guys, part two. Okay, I end up falling asleep, and the next morning, it's kind of another day. But I'm a little bit on a high vibe, you know. I'm like, yo, I just saw the coolest thing I've ever seen, and it was just one little microsecond, and I'm never gonna be the same, you know. Ooh, man, it just gets you right to every point in your being. It's just blown away. I think you could make a whole metal band just based off of that one experience. How can you capture the essence, you know? Cannot be done. Anyways, trying to sound like an Indian sadhu here, but you know. A little bit later, a few months later, see, that was February 2020. Now I'm into early spring 2020. And I've grown in my daily practice. I've, you know, contemplated, meditated, prayed every day. I followed, tried to digest what was happening, try to figure it out, and just swallow these challenges that God had me traverse, and just don't complain, just see it through, you know? And it's been rough because Anyway, so I'm sitting down in contemplation after prayer, and I haven't been to church for 20 years. Yes, I had a abrupt and sudden conversion from a hardcore meditating Buddhist, and I'm about a year into my abrupt 180-degree turnaround to becoming a pious, reborn Christian. I've never been to church yet. I only went to church in middle school and high school. That's for another time. Not a Christian family, but it was a Christian boarding school because my dad was an expat and there was no other school I could go to that had a boarding system. So we were mandatory church attendance, you know. Number two, I haven't been baptized apart from cultural norms in the country I'm born, where you baptize as a baby. But hey, you know, that's I'm not even. Yeah, it did happen. Yeah, it did happen. So I'm thinking, I find out that my local international church in the city I live in is a big oil city. Many international Americans, Brits, Europeans, wherever, Asians from all over the world, all working in the oil business. There's an international church over there, and I'm thinking, hey, I kind of vibe with them. I've gone to like an American Christian sort of school before, and I know a little bit of their style. And so I figure, should I ask them if they do baptisms? And as I thought that, something just pours over me, and it's like, yes, awesome, go get baptized, you know, like just this excitement. And it's not intrinsic to myself. It's like the angel beside me or something. He's like, go get baptized, go do it. It might have been my guardian angel, you know. So I'm like, all right. I look up the international church contact info. Boom, there they are. There's an email. I email them. Hey, are you guys still getting together despite COVID? You guys doing baptisms? Would you mind baptizing me? I want to get baptized here next round. I get an email a couple hours later. It's the dude that runs the show, the pastor. He writes back and he says, oh, that's great. Yeah, we're having a get together next Sunday, this time. After the service, come talk to me about getting baptized. We'll see what we can do. All right, cool. Now I'm feeling stoked. I'm like, I'm going to church. I haven't been to church in years, 20 years. Now, before I go to this church and Sunday, and I find the address. I go and make sure I'm on time. Super cool gang over there, like really chill, really nice. And the pastor turns out to be this ex-professional rugby player from, I believe it was New Zealand, or was it? No, It was over there. It was, I believe it's New Zealand, if I'm not saying it wrong. But I believe he's a Maori Polynesian type. He's got the tats, you know? And he used to play rugby professionally, and now he married a lady from the country I live in, and he's the pastor over in that city, in the International Church. And he's running the show, had the most amazing first re-entry to church. I mean, it was pretty amazing, and there's a little bit about that in a previous video. There was just so many interlaced things happening. God was really weaving a beautiful tapestry that at that time in my life. And I was just having these beautiful experiences. Now, when I had that dream previously, where I saw the warrior, it was very clear that it was coming from what my mind perceived as the left side of my of the space of my mind. Boom! It was coming from the left. And I wondered at the time, why is God having me focus so much on the fact that it's on my left? Why is there even a spacious area in my mind's vision when I'm looking straight at it? Why do I feel like it's coming from what seems to be my left side? More on that later, but God had me pay attention to that when he blew my mind with this war class being, you know. So after the service, I go up and I talk to the pastor, who I'll just not name for now. And I ask him, hey, you know, I'm the guy that emailed you. Hey, you know, cool if we talk about baptism. And immediately we had this beautiful chemistry, and he's like, oh man, your presence so cool, like so good to see you, you know. And I was like, hey, we need to go have a talk. I would love to share you my story because it's crazy. And he's like, yeah, sure. Hey, what about like today? Let's go get a coffee afterwards. It's, you know, down in the city he lives in, there's a cafe. We decided, yeah, okay, I'll meet you there in a couple hours. So boom, we go over there. And I'm like, I'm sharing sort of unadulterated, the full blast, man. I don't even know his background, but I'm like, yo, I've been stalked by demons. I can see them sometimes. They're scanning my mind. And this is my story. I used to be a hardcore meditating Buddhist, and then I started seeing ghosts and spirits. I mean, for reals. And they started harassing my brain, and I couldn't do anything about it. 2 years went by, and then suddenly God tells me I got to convert because I'm on the wrong path, and all these things are happening because I don't have his protection. And I'm like, all right, boom, this is the deal. And I have this conversion. And at the time when I was going through it to try to understand what was happening with myself, I'm checking the time here, so pardon the sudden space intrusion. But at the time when I was starting to understand what was going on, and I realized, okay, this is the God's world, and these guys have been demons. They're not just hungry ghosts, as the Buddhists would call them, or wandering spirits. And then I started wondering, are there pastors that are talking about this out there? Like, who's out there? So I scoured the internet, and then of course God had me, he sent me, well, you know, things would pop up on my YouTube, and God's like, check this out, watch this. All right, boom, watch that. And I came across this guy called Derek Prince. Now he's passed away, but he was a hardcore pastor in England, I believe. Super smart guy. Check him out. You're going to do yourself a lot of favors by listening to Derek Prince. And he explained it, man. He's like, yo, there are occult nexuses in every city. There are the witches and warlock covens. And he got to a point where he was like seeing how the demons was getting inside people's bodies, and he would exorcise them out. And yeah, 8 years ago, I would have said, nutcase. And then I had the same experience as myself. I just didn't know what the truth was because I was only seeing it through the Buddhist lens, even esoteric Buddhism. And then, okay, that's wrong. God told me this. The angel told me that. And then who understands it then from a Christian lens, what I have experienced, what I've seen so clearly? And here he is, Derek Prince. And as far as I know, yeah, he's well known, but he's not like super well known. He's not like that super well known. And I think a lot of Christians probably have some aversion to Derek Prince because, you know, come on, he's trying to cast out demons in people and things like that. And he's telling you that when you get the Holy Spirit to a certain degree, you can go inside a city and you can feel the presence of the occult, and they know that you're coming. So then they send like ill-natured spiritual attack against you, and he knows about that. And he's talking about it. I'm like, that's exactly what I felt, you know? All right, Derek Prince, cool, yeah. So I'm having coffee with my pastor dude, and I'm like, hey, have you bumped into any of this stuff that I'm talking about? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, do you know about Derek Prince? I asked him, right? And he's like, hey, Eric, I was one of the Derek Prince ministers over back in the country where he's from. And then he told me about even when he was little, he saw like these big demons hovering over the towns that he's from, like these broken down ghettos. And he'd like spend hours and days in the wee early morning hours of the day and like pray, dedicate to prayer. And he would see these entities like just hovering over like these ghettos that he's from, blasting down their curses on them, you know, just holding them down. And he knew exactly all this stuff. And I asked him, hey, do you talk to anybody in town about that stuff? Nobody here is going to like have an ear for that, you know? And he's like, oh yeah, you know, I got to sense out the people. We have like kind of like an inner group and we talk about it, but yeah, it's not for everybody. No, people aren't ready to hear that stuff. And I said, wow. And I can't believe now I found somebody that knows what I'm talking about. And God made this interlink, man, you know? So amazed, such a weight off my shoulders, you know? And then I said, hey, and he's like, we're going to do this baptism, right? And I said, yeah, and now we're in the middle of summer, right? Beautiful, warm weather. And he's like, and I said, this is God's work, isn't it? And we're just like, man, we're having such a chemistry moment. It's amazing. So here's the deal. Couple weeks later, we get baptized, and it's a beautiful day out on the beach, close in the city that I used to live in. And I meet up this guy. I'm going to call him Jay to keep it simple. I meet up with Jay on the beach, and he's like, all right, that's my dog's snoring, so pardon that. I'm rolling on into 13 minutes again, so I'm going to have to make a part 3. This rounds up beautifully in part 3. Check this out.